Hi everyone. So in this video, what I'm going to do is just break down some of the costs for my trip to the Isle of Man for TT 2025. It was actually my first visit to the TT. So beforehand, I had absolutely no idea what to expect, what the costs would be, and it was all just a bit of a fact-finding mission. So what I wanted to do in this video was just give you an idea of kind of what to expect and what I actually paid to go and visit the Isle of Man TT this year. So the first major cost to realistically cover and the biggest expense that we had was the ferry. Anyone who's actually based in the UK typically has, when I say the UK, mainland England has two options. Those are to sail from Liverpool, which is primarily bikes and foot passengers, and also sailings from Heysham. Now, Heysham's where we went from because we were in a long wheelbase camper van. So as far as I'm aware, the only options that you've got is to sail through steam packet ferries for both the Liverpool and Heysham crossings. Now, when I was looking to actually book my ferry, I couldn't find an indication of prices. I couldn't really see anywhere where they quoted last year's prices or kind of what to expect. So as you can see from this first invoice, the only information that you get charged, and this is what it quotes as the price when you're actually making your booking on the Steam Packet website, is an £80 deposit. That is it. So at that point, when I made my booking last year, I had absolutely no idea at this time what the ferry crossing was actually going to cost me. All I knew is that I paid an £80 deposit, and that was to come off my balance, which was due in February of 2025. Now, at this point, I also need to caveat that for anyone who's actually looking at the invoice on screen, I've got an £80 deposit and I've got obviously £60 as well. I actually rang back and made an amendment to the booking. The £60 was to book on two dogs onto the ferry as well. So they were £30 each to use the pet lounge on the ferry. So that's what got added to my booking, which was obviously brought my initial deposit up to £140. Now, scrolling down further in that booking confirmation, there's a link there from Steam Packet just to say an example of the pricings based on the previous year's prices. Now, that is actually hyperlinked. However, when I clicked the hyperlink on that email, it didn't bring up any PDF documents. It didn't direct me to any Steam Packet websites. It attempted to open either Maps, Uber, or Zoom, which was absolutely no use whatsoever. So again, at this stage, I still had absolutely no idea, what the kind of prices was and what I was to expect when my final invoice came from Steam Packet. So around January, maybe February of this year, I received my final invoice for payment from Steam Packet. As you can see from the invoice on screen, it clearly shows why this is actually the most significant part of the trip costs. Now, bear in mind, we were traveling in a long wheelbase Citroen Relay camper van. Now, we didn't have any trailers, we didn't have any bike racks on the back. It was purely just a van itself. So you can see from the booking that's being booked for a vehicle up to 5.5 meters long and up to 2.5 meters high. I'll be honest, I don't know how close or if we were over on those measurements. I'd actually booked this trip for my dad originally, so I couldn't actually ask him to go and measure the dimensions of his camper van. But as you can see from the booking on screen, the total cost was actually over £700, and that was just for the ferry crossing, return ferry. So that actually broke down. We had, as I said earlier, we had the £60 for the dogs. We had £509 for the standard vehicle crossing, and an adult at £147. I'm guessing that's myself as an extra adult in the vehicle. So as you can see on the right hand side, there's a payment date of the 28th of February. The fare total was £716. I received a web discount of £12.64. Don't remember what that was for. I'd paid £140 in deposits, and then the final balance due was £563.36 by the 28th of February. Now, the 28th of February is quite a significant date. Now, the reason why the 28th of February is quite a significant date, when the sailings are actually launched on the Steam Packet website, which typically is around the week of TT week, essentially. So they open the bookings for the following year. As I mentioned earlier, the Steam Packet website will only take a deposit. It won't actually take a balance for the actual full journey itself. So what you do typically find is a lot of people will book ferries, £80 deposit, with the intention of travelling in 12 months' time. Now, naturally, people's plans change or whatever it might be. So when these final invoice demands are going out for payment by the 28th of February, there are a lot of bookings which actually drop off the system. So if you're someone who's maybe decided that you want to go to the TT, but you've kind of, no pun intended, missed the boat in terms of booking your ferry, what you'll find is around about the 28th of February, it might be 24, 48 hours after. Again, you'd have to do your own research on that. But Steam Packet will actually re-release all the bookings for which they took deposits on and people didn't actually pay their final balance for their journeys. So if you are someone who was obviously thinking of visiting the TT in 2026, and you're in a position where maybe the ferry crossings that you were looking at have gone or are unavailable, just bear in mind that, you know, obviously when we get to February next year, there might be, again, a second opportunity, a second bite of the apple to actually get the ferry crossings that you actually wanted. Now, please bear in mind, my understanding is this is crossings of which they haven't received payments for. So if you were looking at specific dates that you wanted to be there, you might need to be flexible in your journeys with that one. Again, this was only my experience. It's the first time I've ever been. I don't know all the tricks of the trade. I don't know how Steam Packet operates. It's just purely from what I've learned, from information that I've been given, from speaking to people at the TT, speaking to people who've been before, and then just sort of a little bit of knowledge that I've accrued. Again, I could be wrong, but hopefully it's just something to bear in mind. So hopefully that gives you some major insight in terms of the cost of the ferry to actually get to the Isle of Man. Now, the next probably significant expense that I had was the cost of the campsite. As you can appreciate, such a major event, some of the campsites maybe put their prices up a little bit. I'm not sure. Again, I've never been camping on the Isle of Man, so I can't actually comment from that perspective. However, what you can see is on the map, we actually camped and chose a campsite in the south of the island. Now, the reason for this was, as I previously mentioned, we were traveling with 2 French bulldogs. Now, personally, I know kind of, and I don't mean to stereotype, but certain biker crowds can be on the rev limiter with the bikes at midnight, early hours of the morning, drunk, maybe a bit rowdy. Again, I could be stereotyping there. So my idea was I wanted to stay in the south of the island, away from the track, that it was just a bit quieter, a bit more peaceful, a bit better for the dogs, to be honest with you. So as you can see from the location there, we were actually staying on a campsite called Glendown Farm. Now, to be honest with you, I could not fault this site. It was amazing. The facilities were awesome. The location, for me personally, was perfect. It was directly between Port Erin and Port St Mary on the south of the island. But as you can see from the Google map link, we were 14 miles away from Nobles Park. So for those that don't know, Nobles Park is essentially the pit lane at the track. So it's just on the side of Glencrutchery Road. It's where most of the action is happening in terms of teams, setups, all the sites, TT grandstand, you name it, it's all happening in that area. So if you're someone who maybe wants to go out on the circuit and watch from a different point of view, obviously you can set your maps to wherever. But I just thought it'd be maybe a good indication, because on the grand scheme of things, looking to travel from the south of the island to, you know, Douglas or the north looks, you know, a great distance, but given the size of the Isle of Man and the demographics there, it's about 14 miles from the site to Nobles Park. Now, the site itself was awesome. For me personally, and everything that I wanted to get out of my TT experience, I could not fault the site. The site itself was not overcrowded. It wasn't overbooked. Everybody had plenty of room. Again, we had a campervan pitch on site, and then obviously I'd pitched my tent next to the campervan. But in terms of like a location, it was the views were amazing. You had views across the mountains in the Isle of Man. You were really close to the to both Port St Mary and Port Erin, so the beaches were on your doorstep. It was close to the Sound Cafe. For those of you who don't know what that is, have a quick Google. It's down on the south of the island, just by the Calf of Man. Awesome little spot. On site, there was brilliant facilities. The showers and the toilet block were immaculate. They were deep cleaned every morning. They were kept in incredible condition. There was no damage, there was no smells, there was nothing whatsoever from that point of view. And then also the big selling point for me on this site itself was they had a huge kind of communal area indoors. So it had a fully kitted kitchen. So if you were wanting to cook, it had all the pots, the pans, the cutlery, the plates, you name it. You had access to absolutely everything in the kitchen. It was just a case of, if you want to use it, just wash up after yourself and put it back in the cupboard, which was, yeah, I mean, it was incredible. The other thing it had was washing machine and a tumble dryer, which one night we actually had a weather warning storm, gale force winds, and it absolutely hammered down with rain. Unfortunately, my tent I bought about 15 years ago eventually gave way. So I'd woke up in the middle of the night absolutely soaked to the skin. My bed sheet was soaked, my duvet was wringing wet, my pillow was wringing wet. So I literally had to just get up, grab my stuff, went and thrown it in the tumble dryer. And then in the kitchen area, there's like a huge settee. There's tables, chairs, you name it. So yeah, I didn't have the best night's sleep, so I ended up just sort of dozing off on the couch while my bedding was actually in a tumble dryer. But again, the site itself was incredible. There was like a little steam train and station just literally at the end of the road. And yeah, it's just it was absolutely awesome. I couldn't fault it, especially for what we paid. So in terms of the camping costs, to be honest with you, I found them very, very reasonable. There could be sites which are cheaper on the island. There could be sites which are far more expensive, especially if you're getting, you know, pre-set up tents or whatever it might be. Obviously, hotels, they're going to be a hell of a lot more expensive. But just to give you an idea, this is obviously what we paid in terms of the stay. So for the 12 days, 12 nights on site, which was a campervan pitch, including the electric. The 2 dogs were no extra charge. So again, credit to Glendown for that, because again, they were just awesome. Really lovely family run farm, incredibly friendly, was on site pretty much every single day. He'd either pop up on his van or his quad bike, check in, make sure everything's okay, if anybody needed anything. Again, as I mentioned, we had a huge storm, so we stopped by knowing I was in a tent, and it's like, listen, if you need any extra tent pegs, anything, you know, extra strength, let me know. You're more than welcome to use them. So again, kudos to those guys on the site. But yeah, so the 12 nights was £360. So that was for two adults, the electric for the camper van. I'd pitch my tent next to the van itself anyway, and for the two dogs. So again, from my personal point of view, the location was amazing. The site was friendly. It wasn't overly crowded. Everyone on the site was lovely. You know, obviously you get chatting to people. And yeah, I just thought that was, for me personally, really, really good value. So just away from the costs of the actual trip itself, which is kind of the point of the video, but I just wanted to highlight Port Erin itself, Port St. Mary, absolutely beautiful parts of the world. Anyone who's actually over on the Isle of Man, if you're not going to the TT, I would highly, highly recommend visiting those little towns in the Isle of Man. So one thing that majorly surprised me was the accessibility at the event, in terms of, you know, going to pit lane, viewing spots, whatever it might be. It was incredible. So again, you can go around pit lane. You can even take your dogs into pit lane as well. A lot of the riders are over there with their own pets. And that was something that was really, really surprising for me personally. Most viewing spots as well, to be honest, most of them do not charge. There was a few key parts on the circuit that you actually had to pay a fee for. One of them, understandably, was TT Grandstand. So that's in the pit lane. So again, the price on that was tiered depending on what day of practice it was, right through to race day, and obviously for the senior as well. So that's another cost maybe to take into consideration. We ended up on a few different spots around the track. When we stopped at like a farmer's field in Cronkabody, which was set up as a proper viewing area. I think that was £10 to get on and park the vehicle. Another area we stopped at was down in Greba, and this was just a really, really lovely couple who'd sort of opened up the garden. It was at the side of the circuit. It was a great spot. You could see the riders coming up through the S-bends, and their garden wall, it kind of kicked left at the bottom. So they were actually on the bend as well. So viewing, photographs, whatever it might be, were absolutely incredible. Again, all they asked for was a donation. They had a donation bucket for like the local hospice that they helped and supported from a charitable perspective. Again, they were just like, listen, you don't have to put in, it's non-obligation, but we do like to do our little bit and give back. So if you can contribute, it'd be greatly appreciated. We'll just leave the bucket on the side, and if you can contribute, just put, you know, a couple of coins or a tenner, whatever it might be, in the bucket, whatever you can afford to give, which was amazing. I mean, this couple as well, they actually opened up the family home for using like the toilet and the bathroom facilities in there as well. And you just find like the whole sense of community around the island is incredible. So again, most spots you won't have to pay for, but a couple of the key viewing areas, you know, there might be a little bit of a charge there as well. So that pretty much covers the two major expenses with regards to going to the Isle of Man to the TT. Another one was obviously fuel, which was obviously fuel for the van from just outside of Liverpool up to Heysham, and then obviously driving around the island when you're actually in the Isle of Man itself. That bill was approximately, for the return journeys to the ferry port Heysham and then the 12 days driving around the Isle of Man, we spent approximately £150 on diesel. Now, surprisingly, I actually put my bike in the back of the van because I honestly did not know what to expect when I was on the island itself. I didn't know whether driving around in a long wheelbase van would cause any significant issues in terms of ability to park. I honestly thought we wouldn't get anywhere near the track or anywhere, near parking that was convenient. Turned out I was actually wrong. So we used the van every single day, whether that was on the rest days to go fishing, or whether that was, driving the course, you name it, it got used. So I actually didn't think from that point of view that was too bad. But again, that was just an extra £150 on the trip, plus a little bit of fuel in my bike as well. Other costs, typically you go to these events, you want a little bit of merchandise. So I bought a program for the event, just as a little bit of a memento. And then also so program was £10. And then a board as well. John McGuinness obviously has got a corner named after him on the course. He was selling replicas of his signpost, essentially, and they were like acrylic McGuinness's signposts that he'd actually signed himself, which I thought was pretty cool. So I picked one of those up as well. I signed one of those by John McGuinness, was 20 quid. One thing that actually got me with those was he was selling them in James Hilly's tent. So I've gone into like this muck-off tent and just having a look around. And I was like, oh, they're really cool. So I said to the guy at the till, I was like, can I have one of those, please? He said, to be honest, he's like, John's the salesman, so I'll go and grab John. Lo and behold, I did not expect John McGuinness to be the actual salesman himself. So next minute, I'm obviously waiting to buy one of these little signs, that will hand signed by John McGuinness, and John McGuinness himself come in to actually sell that to me. So that for me really made my trip. John McGuinness, absolute TT legend. What a guy! I actually saw plenty of him around the paddock as well. When we were sort of mooching about, like round pit lane. He was always on like a little electric scooter, always stopping to talk to people, to take photos. He was never kind of hiding in the back of a truck or in the back of a tent. Very accessible, very nice guy, a lot of time for everyone. And yeah, it just really, really made my trip. So again, you'll always be wanting to purchase a little bit of merchandise just to remember the event. So you've got everything from, £10 program, a little bit of £20 merchandise, right through to, for example, people like Ian Hutchinson was selling like framed Dionysi boots, race worn boots, in a little bit of a sort of presentation case. I think they were about £150, £200. I'm not sure exactly. So there was just something for anyone and everyone, depending on your budget as well there. So just to wrap things up, I know it's been a long video. I kind of wanted to just share my first-hand experience, essentially, with anyone who's considering maybe going to the TT. There are obviously different ways of getting there. For example, I know my ferry costs were pretty high. You can fly, you can go as a foot passenger. You might be coming from, say, Northern Ireland or somewhere else. There are a lot of different options available. Some are cheaper, some may be more expensive. Same with accommodation as well. There's a lot of people on the island that will do a home share, so they'll essentially just rent out like the spare bedroom. Like the actual community feel on the island is out of this world. To be honest with you, and there's so many people just willing to open homes up to visitors. Just to touch on that, there was an incident where there was a weather warning issued on the Monday night. 60 miles per hour winds, torrential rain, as I mentioned, with my tent giving way. But there was even like local cafes like Costa's, and they were willing to just keep the doors open 24/7 just to give people shelter who needed it. And you know, Facebook was full of posts from people just saying, you know, we haven't got room to take people in, but if you want to use our laundry facilities, you know, just drop us a message. And honestly, it was amazing. But from an accommodation point of view, you've got campsites, you've got homestays, you've got hotels. Yeah, there's a wide variety of options, and obviously budget can be, you know, stretched in kind of either direction. The only thing I have kind of left off the list is food, drinks, beer, because that can vary person to person. Like, for example, when you're in the Monster Energy fan park, for example, if you wanted a portion of curry and chips, it's like 11 quid. But across the island, there are various co-ops, Spars, Tesco, you name it. They're pretty much in every sort of town on the island as well. So that can obviously cause your budget to fluctuate as well. So yeah, it is just what you make of it, really. Kind of like any event. But yeah, I hope that's been helpful. Hope anyone who's considering going to TT can make use of obviously the video. One thing I will say is, if you are in two minds whether to go, do it. You have to see it to believe it. It is a phenomenal event, and something I'll remember for the rest of my life. So yeah, very glad I did it, and hopefully I'll be back for TT 26.